just like Goldilocks, they're just right. And you're recovering that full amount without getting yourself in trouble. No, none of your listeners want to be on the front page of the newspaper next weekend because they're that landlord that was overcharging for gas or electricity. So that's really a mistake that we want to caution. We're thrilled to work with you. We have databases and we know the laws and the codes that anywhere in the United States. We'll advise you and help you on making sure that you get your leases in the right situation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Journey to Multifamily Millions. I'm your host, founder and CEO of ZANA Investments, Tim Little. And on today's show, we have with us Kelly Koontz. Kelly is the president for Submeter Solutions, Inc., based in Kent, Washington. Submeter Solutions sells, services, and installs utility meters and submetering systems locally and nationally. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here, talk a little about our company and what maybe some of your listeners might be interested in, how we can help them.
Yeah, exactly. And depending on how long folks have been listening to the show, they may or may not make the connection on why I would have a utilities expert on here. But trust me, we'll get there. Before we do that, though, Kelly, please tell us more about your background and how you got started on your real estate related journey.
Happy to give you a bit of my background. I'm an old dude these days. Just turned 63. I was at a high school reunion and wondered where all these old people came from. And then I looked in the mirror. But I started my career. We're just based outside of Seattle area. And so a lot of Seattle, of course, has been building aerospace business. And that's where I started my career way back out of college and spent some time in management and manufacturing companies in the aerospace business and got into this whole submetering and utility billing world back in 2010. And it's a fun story to tell you, Tim, about that. One of my best friends from forever had started a small online business to sell, of all things, gas and water meters. And there's an interesting story about him connecting with a friend of his, had a distribution company out of California. He realized nobody really was doing that online back in the early 2000s. And so he built a website and started selling gas and water meters. And that's my current business partner, Jeff, who founded Submeter Solutions. And I remember seeing him and joking with him going, that business might actually have some legs if you keep at it. But his goal was always just to make enough money to take his family on vacation. He was working at his day job after that. But he was soon finding success enough that he quit his job and was doing this full time. And I had an opportunity. I was working at a medium-sized manufacturing company. It was flying to Asia every other month, big job, doing well, and worried about whether I was going to have a heart attack and burn out. And he said, you should come join me. So long story short, we doubled the size of Submeter Solutions when I joined him in early 2010. And the rest is history. We've been growing ever since then. We now are a company that does literally tens of thousands of meter sales every year, and we're billing for about 25,000 units every month all over the country, 20 plus folks on our staff, our team. And my business partner, Jeff, retired in 2020, and I'm hoping to join him sometime in the next few years. But right now I'm still having too much fun. So that's my story.
Nice. Yeah. So I want to get in a little bit because you talked about how you joined him. And at the time, it sounded like you had a pretty decent job, but burnout, travel, I know how that stuff can start to wear you down. But you must have seen some potential in what he was doing that you thought it would be enough to provide you with an income, which is important. So yep. What did you see was the potential there when you decided to make what I would guess is a calculated risk in quitting your job and joining him?
It was a big time risk. Number one, it was a good time in my life when my children had gotten through college, and it was an opportunity where making a risky decision like that made more sense. But cutting your salary literally more in half and joining your buddy who you've known forever but have never worked with before was a big risk. But the opportunity not just to work with him, which was a big, huge part of this. He's a super quality guy. And quite frankly, I've really was investing in kind of both him and me more than the actual concept of what our business model is. And that's really proven to be successful. So I think that's really the germ of making that work for us. We certainly have picked an industry that we think is fantastic in that it's needed by folks when we tell our story. Most of the time we don't have to press. It's an easy sell when people understand what we do with recovering utility costs for multifamily owners. And it's got a environmental positive impact. We feel good about what we can do to help our world out as well. So there's a lot of things like that really align nicely with my values. And it's been nice to see our company grow and really stand behind those as well.
Yeah. And it sounds like the business itself has changed, grown over time, starting from the selling those meters online to what it is now. Can you talk a little bit about what that business looked like when you first joined? And it was probably relatively humble, the selling the metering systems online. But I imagine that since that time, it has grown into something very different. Can you talk a little bit about the differences in what the business looked like when you joined to the offerings that you guys have now?
Yeah, great question. Yes, certainly most of our business when I started was selling metering equipment. And a lot of that was done online, direct shipments from suppliers to our customers. Part of what's changed is we now pair more equipment and add value by putting whole systems together and configuring them, helping our clients to get through the installation process. And if that means we need to hire a plumber on our own to put a water metering system in, for instance, we will do that now. And then the other huge part of what's grown since I started is the monthly utility billing services that we can offer clients once they've got a metering system in place in their apartment or condo, and the different service levels that we can support, including collecting the money and credit card payments and online services and translation services, from very humble starts to when it was just Jeff and me to a real full service utility management company is what we've become.
Awesome. And I think you hinted at a few of these things, but what are some of the biggest opportunities for commercial multifamily owners specifically on where they can save money when it comes to utilities?
So Tim, I'm sure if your listeners are a multifamily owner or a manager and they're looking at their financials, their P&L, they can see that one of their largest expenses year over year are just paying the utilities. And you may find that maybe the electricity is being handled and billed directly to the residents, but very common, it's water or sewer or even gas. You're getting a single bill for the whole property. And so as you're faced with, how am I going to cover those costs? And for many years, the answer to that is I'm just going to add a little extra to my monthly rents as I charge my rent and hope that extra $50 kind of covers that water sewer every month. And the challenge with that is that, number one, it may not be enough. If there's a toilet flapper up and in a couple of your units that are leaking and you get a bigger bill, that's coming out of your pocket if you're the owner. Number two is your residents don't really value that utility. Water is essentially, in their mind, free. And so they're going to not worry about conserving that. And that's all basically at your cost if you're just covering that water sewer cost inside the monthly rent. Some people have taken the next step up, which is an allocation-based method of recovering that. Industry likes to use that acronym RUBS, Ratio Utility Billing Systems. And that's certainly better than just trying to cover it inside the rent. But really, you're still not creating any incentive with your residents for them to conserve. It's really, they're still paying for water that maybe their neighbors are wasting and vice versa. And we really believe that the very best method is to literally put a meter on every unit and then bill your residents for what they actually use. And when you do that, a magical thing happens, quite frankly. And we see this time and time again when we put a metering system in a property that hasn't had one. The overall water bill after, say, 3-4 months is actually going to drop 20 to 30% because human nature kicks in. And when you're actually something that you're using, you tend to use less and you take more care of it. So that's the real power of submetering. And our business is all about helping you to achieve that at your property. And that can be any size property, hundreds of units down to a triplex. And we're going to help you in 2 ways. We can get that metering system in place and installed and reading everybody's usage, whether it's water, gas, or electric. And then part 2 is we can help you with that monthly billing services as well. So that's really the heart of what we do is we work with anybody who's got a property, a multifamily or a multi-unit property that's got multiple tenants. That can be apartments and condos, it can be a mobile home park, it can be marinas, it can be a commercial strip mall, commercial office space even, but anywhere where you're getting a single bill from the utility. And we are going to help you split that up.
Yeah, and I'm glad you went into the details on RUBS because that's one of the most common that I've seen anyways, other than individual metering. And I also couldn't remember what the R stood for. So I'm glad that you brought it up first. But that's an important point, right? It's one, you could argue it's a matter of fairness for the tenants themselves. But then there's also the water conservation aspect, if you want to get into that. And then there's a pure cost perspective from the part of the owner. Talk to me about that cost benefit analysis when an owner talks to you and they say, hey, I have a triplex or I have a 100-unit complex and it's not already submetered. How do they do that math to figure out whether it makes sense for them to drop the money to put in those meters? Because that may be part of an overall value add plan, right? So that they could sell that to the next investor who buys it in 5 or 10 years, but it needs to make financial sense for the bottom line. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I sure can, Tim. And I'm really glad that you're thinking that through smart. And I want to first start by saying if your listeners are in that first condition where you're just trying to cover it in your monthly rental, if nothing else, move to a RUBS methodology. That's certainly going to disconnect you from what you're bringing in and from what the actual bill is and allow you to start doing a better job matching up the costs with what you're collecting from your residents. So certainly that would be the first step. And we have a lot of clients that we do billing services for that are RUBS, and that's certainly way better than not doing anything at all. But in terms of taking it to that next step of actually adding a metering system, yes, there are some upfront costs. I think that one of the real surprises when we talk to folks that ask us about metering systems, they almost always are really surprised that it's much less expensive than they think it is. And I'll be happy to share here a few examples of that. But we are actually able to help you with coming up with a return on investment calculation. Most of the time, especially if you are trying to cover those rents in your those costs in your monthly rent, and we put a metering system in and start billing directly, and we'll continue to use water and sewer as a good example. And if you choose to not lower the rent at all, or maybe lower it a little, you're still likely going to recover your investment costs for the hardware within 1 year. And so we see some very fast time return on investments that this is going to improve your cap rates. If you're considering making a sale of a property, your investors want to see that you've put investments in like a metering system, because it just makes your property more valuable because they know you're controlling those costs. And then I mentioned that toilet flapper leak. I think that's worth noting here that's a really big deal now in our industry as well. In addition to being just able to recover those costs, the equipment that we now offer actually allows you to get an emailed or a text alert when the system recognizes that water's been running for 24 hours. And so you can solve that problem. Residents going to be happy. They're not going to get hit with a big bill. Your overall bill is going to be less. Everybody wins in that situation. And we have clients that are now buying equipment, metering systems, really on the basis of just that leak prevention. So
yeah, and that makes sense too, right? Because leaks can escalate. It's one thing to spend an extra couple of dollars because a toilet and you have to like jiggle the handle, that whole thing. But I know that there's like moisture detectors and stuff like that. That might be out of the scope of what we're talking about here. But if you catch a leak like that, that could save you thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars.
That's a growing part of our business as well. Just to touch on that we call that active leak detection. If somebody's flooding, we have systems that integrate with our metering architecture. And so that can even be an alert as well within a couple minutes of detecting a flood in a bathroom. We've particularly low-income housing and some institutions like education, they're really talking to us about that as well. Give us a call. We'd be happy to talk about that as well.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things I wanted to hit as you were talking through it. I just wanted to clarify for folks on the RUBS piece. When you first hear about RUBS, it can be a little deceptive in terms of, oh, you just take the number of units you have and divide it, and that's it. It's actually a lot more complicated than that. I would think more complicated algorithm or formula is the right word that you use to figure out how much each person pays. But it's logical, right? So someone who has a 3-bedroom unit with 2 bathrooms is going to pay more for water than someone with a studio with 1 bathroom, right? It's not just a matter of every unit pays the same. It's based on the expected usage, as I understand it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tim. You need to set up and let your residents know in their lease what that method is. That could be based on square footage, or as you said, number of bathrooms or number of bedrooms. Many times it's based on occupancy. And even that can get a little complicated. It's not a straight line. So we see occupancy RUBS algorithms where 1 resident is a value of 1, but 2 residents is a value of 1.6. So we have all of those types of things to try to make it as fair as possible. But what's really key, though, is that even if it's based on occupancy like that, and yes, you are getting an opportunity to recover those costs, but it's still not based on what really is truly happening with the utility water as an example.
Yeah. And one thing I was going to ask that you guys do, and it sounds like you might, is like an audit to see where people are at and how much they might save by putting in new hardware. I'm thinking like low flow toilets, the aerator faucets or whatever they call them. I think the one area where you should never skimp is the shower, although I'm sure there's techniques there, but you really don't want to get on the bad side of people when it comes to water pressure in the shower, because that's a very divisive topic. But are there those types of audits that you guys can go in and do and say, hey, if you had these more water saving hardware installed, you might save this much over the long term or per month?
We've actually worked with a couple companies that specialize in doing that kind of analysis, and we've partnered with them along with putting systems in. And all of those ideas that you mentioned, and then some, are always really helpful and tend to be measurable. I will, though, point out that whether you're putting in low flow faucets or even the shower or low water toilets, those all make a small dent. But I would tell you that the very single biggest influence to lowering the overall bill is having the residents directly pay for it. And that is a multiple in terms of its real impact on the size of the bill. And boy, I can tell you, if I go stay at a hotel and it's got a fireplace or something, I burn that fire. I keep that gas fireplace on all the time because I'm not paying for it. And if you have that kind of attitude when you're on a weekend vacation, think about what your residents think about all day, every day. And that's really the power of what we can offer.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, that would be the biggest thing. If you're paying for it, if you can push that cost fairly onto the tenants. But we have to acknowledge too, there are the common areas where things like, I think about electricity for the most part, right? If you have extensive lighting throughout your property, especially if it's large, you want a lot of lighting for safety reasons, stuff like that. Have you seen instances where you're able to recommend to a customer, or is this not part of what you do, where you say, hey, you are spending a lot of money on your lighting, and maybe that pushes them to say, okay, I'm going to go get LEDs versus the regular light bulbs I have, at least providing them that information and that data so that they can make smarter decisions.
Yep. Who was it who famously told us we can't control something until we measure it? And really, that's the business we're in. If we can put an electric meter on your parking lot lights, we now really can truly calculate how much money you're spending every month on those common areas with electricity. And that's something that we do all the time. And so it really comes down to, are you making some fundamental guesses? Are you hoping and wishing that you're covering things? Or let's put a meter on and let's find out what it really is.
Awesome. Yeah. And those were just some of the things that I was thinking through as you collect that data that, again, you can make a relatively small investment that may save you a lot of money over time, but you wouldn't have known that unless you had that data to guide you in that direction. So why don't you talk to me about some of the biggest mistakes that you see property owners are making when it comes to utilities?
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes that we tend to hear about, and we're really careful to work with our clients is, which is an important principle as we talk about this, is that being able, whether it's RUBS or submetering, to charge directly back to your residents for their utility is in almost all parts of the U.S. legal, and it's appropriate, but it is not legal or appropriate to try to make this into a profit center. So one of the mistakes that sometimes we see folks make is, hey, this is great. We're going to put some meters on and I'm going to add 30% to the cost of the utility. And I'm going to put this in my own pocket because I paid for those meters and I'm managing this. And so we would like to start right there. This is not an opportunity for you to build this in with extra margin. The laws are super clear about that. You do get to recover all your costs. It's, as we talk about not just metering systems, but that whole billing process, it's super important that you're either, whether you're doing it yourself or whether you're working with a company like ours that provides you that third-party billing service, that you're sending bills out that are not too much, but not too little. They're just like Goldilocks, they're just right. And you're recovering that full amount without getting yourself in trouble. No, none of your listeners want to be on the front page of the newspaper next weekend because they're that landlord that was overcharging for gas, electricity. So that's really a mistake that we want to caution. We're thrilled to work with you. We have databases and we know the laws and the codes at anywhere in the United States. We'll advise you and help you on making sure that you get your leases in the right situation. Our billing services are such that we can work with your software and make sure that it's set up so that it's as easy for you to use as you need it to be.
Yeah, I'm glad you put out that cautionary note because the savvy investors are always trying to think of new and innovative ways to bring in additional sources of income. We just need to make sure that, one, it provides a value to the tenants themselves, and two, we're staying on the right side of the law, which is the part that you're getting at. It's perfectly legitimate to throw in a laundromat and then charge for that service of using the laundry. It's a little different when we're talking about utilities. So I'm glad you put that disclaimer out there. All right, we do need to transition into the turbo round now. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions that I ask every guest that's on the show, and I just ask for a quick, honest answer. Are you ready, Kelly?
You betcha. Bring it on.
All right, first question. What is one red flag every investor should look out for?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is it too good to be true? Maybe you get that common as an answer, but boy, for me and my investments, I'm always so quick to get a second opinion. If something looks too good to be true, I'm old enough now to realize that maybe there is something there that you need to dig a little deeper on. Always investigate. use the facts, try to separate out your emotion and let data make your decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes putting those emotions aside is the hardest part, especially when you get excited. But all right. Second question, what is a myth about this business that you would like to set straight?
Oh, super good question. Some of your listeners may be going, oh yeah, I've heard of submetering. That's what those 200-unit apartment buildings do, but I've only got 6-plex. This isn't for me. And that is such a myth. We do lots of submetering projects and systems for as small as a duplex. If you've got a small property that you're paying a single bill on, the numbers will pencil out. Challenge us on that. We'd love to give you a proposal for your property, big or small. And then you may still want to do the billing internally in-house. We'll set you up for success with that. But really, it's important to know that this is going to be less expensive than you think it is.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up. I assume that's something that you guys could do with some level of certainty just based on the details that someone gives you about their property. Is that right?
It's exactly right. If your listeners are interested in finding out more, we're going to give you a website to have them visit. They can fill out just a bit of information, and with a 5 or 10 minute phone call with one of our specialists, we're going to ask a few specific questions about your property, and we'll send you a proposal that is right down to the penny on the hardware costs, and we'll work with you on installation details and whether you are needing to hire, say, a plumber that's local, or we can help you with that. We'll get you everything you need so that you have a really good understanding of your.
Awesome, thanks. All right, final question. What does success look like to you?
I'm going to jump out of the business world, Tim, on that one. I am a proud father of 3 adult children with sons-in-laws, 3 adult daughters and sons-in-laws, and 5 granddaughters. If your listeners are counting, that's 8 and 0 with girls in my family. And boy, we're talking on a Monday. I got a chance to see a couple of my granddaughters just yesterday. And when I get a big smile from them when they call me Pa, that is success for me. I know I'm doing something right if they're happy and I'm being around me. And that is what life's all about for me.
There you go. I'm a girl dad too. I got 2 right now, 5 and 8, almost 6 and 9. A little far away from the grandkids, but I'm looking forward to that day myself.
It'll come faster than you think, Tim.
Yeah, exactly. The time does fly. All right, Kelly, I really appreciate all the tips that you've given us on here. Even though it's not something that's talked about all the time, it is hugely important for the bottom line of virtually any property. Right. Yep. So please tell our listeners how they can get a hold of you and if there's anything else you'd like to share with them.
Yep. Our company is Submeter Solutions. We're just outside of Seattle in Kent, Washington. We service all over the United States and into Canada. Our website is Submeter Solutions with an S at the end, .com. And if your listeners go to our website /podcast, they're going to land on a landing page that they can fill out their name and contact information, and one of our specialists will give them a call, and we can get you a proposal, talk to you about your specific situation, and answer any questions you have.
Awesome. Kelly, thanks again for coming on. We'll have all that information in the show notes. Appreciate you being here and look forward to continuing to see you do big things on your journey.
Thank you very much, Tim. It's been a pleasure.
Same. Have a good one.
Thanks.